What's up folks, how's it going? This is Waj. Hope you guys are all doing well, and today we're going to be taking a look at the new generation iPhone 13 Pro and Pro Max. We're going to be taking a look at the core differences between these new generation of Pro iPhones compared to the previous generation iPhone 12 Pro and Pro Max. And we're also going to be doing a comparison between probably its nearest competitor with the Samsung Galaxy S21 Ultra, since we didn't get a new Note this year. So if you're interested in seeing if the new generation iPhone 13 Pro and Pro Max are worth upgrading to, or how they compare against the Samsung counterpart, it's a perfect video for you, and let's get right into it. Now, in terms of the design, size, and overall dimensions, nothing has really changed from the iPhone 12 to the 13 lineup. Pretty much exactly the same in most regards, with the exception that the Pro and Pro Max iPhone 13s are about roughly 10 grams more heavier. The front camera true depth sensor array is about 20% smaller on the iPhone 13 lineup than the previous generation, but other than that, the phones are identical front to back. In terms of displays, they're pretty much identical in terms of resolution and pixel density, but now we have ProMotion 120Hz refresh rate, which has the ability to dynamically change the refresh rate to optimize for battery life, for lower refresh rates down to 10 Hz, all the way up to 120 Hz for fast fluid motion. On top of that, the brightness has been also increased for typical use at up to 1000 nits versus 800 nits on the previous generation, but the max brightness is still about the same at around 1200 nits in HDR plus mode. Furthermore, all iPhone 13s are powered by Apple's A15 Bionic chip, which consists of 15 billion transistors compared to 11.8 billion on the A14. We have similar overall architectures across generations, 6-core CPU consisting of 2 performance cores and 4 high-efficiency cores, 16-core neural engine, as well as an all-new 5-core GPU compared to a 4-core GPU on the A14. On top of that, the maximum storage availability has now gone up to 1 terabyte compared to 512 gigabytes on the previous generation. Now, in terms of cameras, from the looks of it, the front-facing camera is pretty much identical to the previous generation, so you still have 12 megapixel stills with 4K 60 FPS recording capturing capabilities. In terms of the rear-facing side on the 13 Pro Max, looks like we're using the same overall 12 megapixel wide camera sensor on the main camera, but we have a wider aperture of f1.5 compared to f1.6. Apple claims that this is going to improve low light performance by 2.2 times. The main improvements are regarding the telephoto and ultra wide. With the telephoto, we've upgraded the lens to a 77mm compared to 65mm, giving it up to 3 times optical zoom, increasing the optical overall zoom range of the entire camera array 6 times compared to 5 times on the 12 Pro Max. Furthermore, the ultra wide camera is still rated at 13 millimeters, but now we have a wider aperture at f1.8 compared to 2.4, which is going to improve low light performance at up to 92%. The other big thing is now we have a 6-element lens compared to 5 elements on the previous gen, which is going to help minimize the minimum focus distance down to 2 centimeters, so you can actually do some close-up macro photography and videography with the 13 Pro and Pro Max. Now, in terms of video-specific features, Apple has added cinematic mode, which introduces things like rack focus, which will track subjects individually and using predictive algorithms will choose focus points automatically and enhance the autofocus bokeh elements, kind of like what they do in portrait mode, but now for video. This can be done autonomously or even in the post-production process, but keep in mind it's going to process your video in 1080p 30 FPS. Furthermore, you can also shoot ProRes video directly onto the phone, given that you have the 256 gigabyte and up model. Since ProRes video is very data intensive on the 128 gigabyte version of the phone, you're limited to 1080p at 30 FPS. Of course, you can still shoot in the standard video mode using the HEVC and H.264 codecs at 4K 60 FPS. Now, in terms of battery life, we don't know exact capacities at this point, but what we do know is that that the Pro and Pro Max are going to be around 1.5 and 2.5 hours more than the previous generation. Now, in terms of comparing the 13 Pro and Pro Max to the latest version of what Samsung has equivalent to offer, which is the S21 Ultra. In terms of displays themselves, the S21 Ultra has a 6.8-inch display, slightly larger than the biggest iPhone has to offer at 6.7. We do have a greater resolution as well as a greater PPI count, about 516 versus 458 on the 13 Pro Max. Both displays have adaptive refresh rates at up to 120 Hertz, and in terms of maximum brightness in HDR mode, the S21 Ultra can go up to 1500 nits versus 1200 nits on the iPhone. Furthermore, in terms of the internal performance, for the past couple of years, Apple has really been killing it with their SoCs, and the A14 that powered the previous generation iPhone 12 was actually faster than the Qualcomm Snapdragon 888, which powers the S21 Ultra, as well as Samsung's latest Z Fold 3. In fact, we recently benchmarked the Z Fold versus the 12 Pro Max powered by the A14 Bionic, and the A14 was significantly faster both in terms of multi-core and single-core performance. And given the fact that the A15 is going to be even faster than the A14, that means the new generation iPhones are going to be well ahead of the game in terms of hardware processing and overall internal speed. Now, in terms of the camera configurations, since we know that there's not going to be a dramatic difference between the architecture of the iPhone 13 Pro camera compared to the previous generation, we know for a fact from a telephoto standpoint, since the S21 Ultra has a quad configuration camera with a periscope lens, we know from a telephoto perspective and an optical perspective, it's going to have the greater range at up to 10x optical zoom compared to 6x on the 13 Pro Max. And the standard wide camera also has a much greater resolution, up to 108 megapixels compared to 12 megapixels. So that means picking out fine details in a shot is going to be a lot easier on the Samsung compared to the iPhone. We also know when it comes to nighttime and low light photography, the Samsung does a great job of rendering out especially highlight details in night scenes where the iPhone 12 Pro Max kind of struggled and kind of blew some details out. Hopefully with the low light improvements on the new 13 Pro Max, we'll see better results in those low light situations. Now, since on the ultra wide camera on the iPhone 13 Pro, you can focus down to 2 centimeters into your subject, that might make it a great macro photography camera, perhaps even greater than the S21 Ultra, which has a focus enhancer mode in its main camera, but doesn't allow you to come in as close as potentially the iPhone. We'll see and do a side-by-side comparison once we get our hands on the new gen iPhone. Furthermore, from a video perspective, based on our experience with the 12 Pro Max, which is probably the best video camera that you can find on any generation smartphone, and with the capabilities on the new iPhone 13 being able to shoot in ProRes, that might make it even better than the previous generation, which is already great to begin with. It's pretty much going to be a no-brainer. I'm sure the video performance is going to be superior than what you're going to encounter on most smartphones, including the S21 Ultra, which even though it can shoot 8K, is definitely not as good as the iPhone, especially when it comes to low-light video performance. The only real advantage I can see on the S21 Ultra from a video perspective is the fact that you can do ultra slow motion at 960 frames per second for a brief moment at 720p versus the iPhone tops out at 240 frames per second at 1080p. Lastly, we know that one of the most disappointing things about the previous generation iPhone 12 Pro and Pro Max was the overall battery life. Compared to the S21 Ultra, it was definitely subpar. In fact, during our video playback test, we got a total runtime of 21 hours on the S21 versus 15 hours on the 12 Pro Max. Hopefully with the larger battery capacity and overall power efficiencies with the new display as well as the A15 Bionic, we can improve the overall battery life, and we will definitely do a battery run test once again we get our hands on the phone, which is going to be around September 24th. Now, besides that, guys, that's really it. Definitely love to know what you guys think of the new generation iPhone 13 Pro and Pro Max. Do you think it's worth upgrading to if you're coming from the previous generation? In my personal opinion, based on what I've seen thus far, probably not. You're going to get slight improvements in terms of performance, battery life, and cameras, which was to be expected, but it's a more incremental upgrade to say nonetheless. We're definitely going to do a full comparison of the iPhone 13 Pro Max and to see how it compares against its nearest counterparts with Samsung smartphones and things like that. So definitely make sure you subscribe to the channel to watch our full camera comparison and battery test. Additionally, if you're interested in supporting the channel directly, you can go through the description to find our PayPal link where you can support us directly. Big thank you for your continuing support and to watch our content. Without you guys, none of this would be possible. Thanks again, and we'll see you real soon. Take care.